outside the limit of our sight, feeding off us, perched on top of us from birth to death, are our owners. Our owners. They have us. They control us. They are our masters. Wake up. They're all about you, all around you.
Where there's thunder, there's lightning. John Mgtow. As many of you have seen over the past week or so, Mgtow is Freedom, or Big John, has been removed from the YouTube airwaves. And the only reason that I could think that he was removed was not because of any violation of terms of service, but rather because he was a threat. Big John wasn't out there really saying anything salacious or over the top. He was simply speaking the truth. And in a day and age like this, the truth cannot be suffered to be heard. Big John was a threat because Big John showed us what could be. You know, here's a guy that's, divorced, had a kid or two, and yet he was living a life of freedom. He was living a life that he chose for himself. He was truly a man going his own way. And so therefore, his presence and his influence had to be diminished, because what he was a true inspiration to a lot of the younger Mgtow out there who are still in that turbulent time, wondering how things are going to come out. And so I think that's why Big John was silenced by YouTube once and for all. But just because they've taken Big John off the air doesn't mean that they'll take all of us off the air. I mean, who knows what's going to happen to my channel? Who knows if my channel will one day meet that same fate, or if other channels will also meet that same fate. The problem with silencing people is because when you silence people, people tend to wonder why they're being silenced. People tend to wonder what it is the person's saying that is so threatening or so out there that it can't even be allowed to be heard in a free society. And so it causes people to actually look and dig deeper. And I think actually more people will find Mgtow the more that they try to censor the Mgtow channels and the content contributors out there. And the other thing about Mgtow is, it's like the head of a hydra. Because though we don't all agree on everything, we don't all agree on religion, on politics, on social values, but the one thing, if I had to say that Mgtow had a magnus opus, the one things that we do agree upon are the things that they fear most, and that is, don't marry, don't cohabitate, don't impregnate, and don't concern yourself with the opinions of others. Now, that being said, TFM mentioned on his show about a week ago, it really started getting me thinking about a video that I made about a year or two ago about prostitution versus dating. It's now getting to the point that you're not any more safe seeking out quote-unquote professional help than you are with the average woman out there. The idea that if you go out there and you pay a professional, you're going to be free of false rape claims, and the STD rate is probably the same amongst your average woman as it is a prostitute. Well, here an article from the Daily Mail where a prostitute has been accused of shooting a man in the head twice because he was performing oral sex wrongly on her, and she did not know how to tell him. The 36-year-old man who was shot in the head twice miraculously survived the attack after he was shot on October 24th, so this is fairly recently. Police then arrested the escort who had been to the man's house on several occasions prior to that. She wept as she appeared in court to face charges. So already she's, breaking the crocodile tears out and trying to make the courts feel bad for her in order to get a diminished or a lighter sentence. Now, the top comment on this article is very interesting. It's from a male, and his comment is, "She's hot, I forgive her." So that just tells you all you need to know about a gynocentric society. And, if the girl's attractive, I mean, it's inevitable, and I've seen it in numerous articles and numerous news stories, and so have other Mgtow content contributors who have pointed this out. If you're an attractive woman, you're going to get a sentence that is a lot lighter than that of your male counterpart. Just look at all the female teachers who molested their students. They, particularly if they're attractive, they tend to get a free pass on that. But notice that the reason for shooting the man given in the article was because he was performing oral sex wrong. And we're told that women are these great communicators, that their communication skills are so far above par of that of men. But yet, rather than just tell the man to stop or tell the man what it is that she wanted him to do, she shoots him in the head 2 times because she had no other way of communicating to him other than that she did not enjoy what was going on. What actually occurred, if you read between the lines, is that she attempted to rob the man while he was in this vulnerable position. But the article doesn't say that, curiously enough. Now, the other thing that we're talking about here, as it relates to Mgtow, is that a lot of people think, and partially probably thought, that Big John's channel was about hatred of women, or that we don't like women. When in fact, we are not Mgtow because the laws are as bad as they are. That's part of it. We're not Mgtow simply because of the legal environment that we find ourselves in. But most of us are Mgtow because we have realized that that's the best way to live, considering what is going on. And it's not that we so much so hate women, it's that we understand women. There is no hatred involved with Mgtow. There's no hatred here from myself or many of the other Mgtow content contributors or many of the other Mgtow out there themselves. It's not a hatred of women, but an understanding of women and how they operate and what it is that they want. Going back to the prostitution thing, it's become more and more prevalent to see this kind of thing happening. And I know of several stories of people who have frequented Backpage and they've had their wallet stolen or they've had their money stolen, because typically alcohol is involved with these situations, and so alcohol causes a reduced cognition ability, which makes one right to be robbed or stolen from. But also there seems to be a prevalence coming about and rising about, not just of escorts stealing money or the threat of violence from said interactions, but also there is the threat of false rape accusation. If you don't tip the girl enough, if you don't give the girl, if there's a disagreement with the original agreement as far as money goes, there's always that possibility of upsetting said person, and then finding yourself with a false rape accusation, regardless of the fact that this particular individual is an escort or prostitute. None of that will factor in. They'll call that victim shaming, victim blaming. It won't matter that you'll have an agreed upon, consented upon objective between the other person. All that will matter is that you have been falsely accused of a rape accusation by a female. And that's all that they'll look at. Now, I brought up the fact the other day, a friend of mine texted me. He's around about the same age as me. And he already completed college with a 4-year degree. He's going back to college now to get some kind of teaching certification or something like that. So now he's back in the college/university environment, and he finds himself he's only ever had one serious relationship, and that didn't, of course, that ended the way most of them do. And so he finds himself in a new environment with a younger generation. And he just sends me a text the other day about, let me see if I can find it. The text was where he was talking about girls with tattoos. So apparently he's on one of these apps or whatever, like Tinder or whatever. He says, "What is with all the tattoos girls have now? I feel like you're the only one left who agrees with me. Try to discuss it and I'm judgmental, but who said they were sexy in the first place?" And that's a funny, I mean, he's absolutely right. But he is so far behind the curve on understanding things. And I've tried to drop some red pill knowledge, some Mgtow knowledge to him, but he's one of those people that he wants to believe that there's something more out there, something magical or whatever. And I brought up the idea of sex dolls with him, to which he seemed he seemed kind of to recoil back at just the idea of that. And at one time, I would have done the same thing. It's only been in the past 2 years or so that idea has become very commonplace to me, and nothing odd about that jumps out at me anymore. And of course, the argument against it is, of course, with that sort of, situation, there is no love, there is no companionship, there is no relationship. But when I really sit there and think about almost 90% or more of the relationships that I have had, there was never any love or companionship or relationship that was not somehow tied into how they benefited from me. And the minute that, I was an inconvenience, the minute that I didn't do what they felt like I should be doing, or wasn't living my life the way that they felt like I should, then, all that came crumbling down, all that came unwinding and unraveling. At least with a sex doll, you don't get all the arguments, all the yelling. You're not spending a ton of money, on somebody that's not grateful for what you're doing for them. And you're getting about the same amount of love, companionship, and support. And that's another big one. I don't think I ever got any support from anybody I ever dated, but I was firmly supposed to be planted firmly in their camp for them. And whenever they needed me, I was supposed to just drop whatever I was doing and come and run and support them. But then when the shoe was on the other foot, not only was it unattractive, not only was it a turnoff, but it was almost viewed as a chore for them to have to do. So you're going to get about the same amount of support and companionship from a real woman as you would a sex doll. I mean, it's just kind of the way it is, guys. And like I said, it's not that we hate women, it's that we understand women. On a quick note, I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast the other day. It's some woman on there that was supposedly supposed to be some type of comedian. And they were basically on there talking about how, when things happen to, sexual assault, these kind of Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey type situations, when they happen to a woman, it's not as bad as when they happen to a man. In fact, to many people, rape is funny when it happens to a man. And at some point in the podcast, and I can't remember the exact wording, but basically the lady came out and said that she didn't believe that, things like sexual harassment, sexual assault affected young boys as much as it did young girls. That is to say that when it happened to young boys, it wasn't as devastating and detrimental to them as if it were to happen to a young girl. And this tells you that you have no value as a man, but you certainly have no value as a boy. There's no concern for you from birth. I mean, you're circumcised against your will. Young boys, the way the education system works now is that if you don't fit into that female gynocentric climate of learning, they dope you up. They put you on as many pills as possible. But for the young girls, they make every accommodation imaginable, bending over backwards, whatever it takes to, make them feel accommodated and make them feel like they have the best chance. And so this is our society, guys. This is what society thinks of you. You are disposable as a guy. You have no value as a guy. And indeed, you've been taught from birth, you've been brought up from birth that you are to serve, and that your value, your wants, your concerns, your way is secondary. You're supposed to be a tool. You're supposed to be, a support system. You're supposed to be all these things for somebody else, in preparation, of course, for a family. And many of us get to the end of our lives or close with no thought ever having been given to ourselves. We don't even know who we are because we've been so busy running ragged, trying to please everyone else, trying to be everything for everyone else, that we've lost ourselves. Well, guys, that's all the time I have today for the Days of Thunder. Remember, they live while we sleep.